like, don't forget to answer this.
Yeah, Nick, we can see the top right-hand corner of your screen, so
Feel
I don't know what it is. So
I was away during health committee, like Tanya was pinging me messages, and I was just having to sit like this, sort of. So it wasn't broadcast to the world.
So,
I'm not much heard.
Sorry.
Emily's just said that they're going to make it live at 5 too, so yeah. I'll warn everybody as they come in, we're already
Sorry
live.
about the call, but I have tested it.
Excuse me, I've just got frog in the throat.
Okay, thank you.
Sort my frog out.
So we've got some more coming, have we? Too many apologies.
I haven't got any apologies, no, other than Dan, but he's arranged a substitute, so.
Yeah.
Hi, how can I help?
Not all. I switched you on.
That'd be interesting if we get partway through the meeting what the answer is to the question. I've got the reminder in front of me anyway.
Yeah, well, I'd actually put it on, do not disturb or whatever, but it obviously doesn't shut that bit off.
No.
I think I always turn mine off. Sometimes I forget to turn it back on again.
Yeah.
That's all. I do that with my life sometimes.
So they've already set us as live on the meeting, so.
Oh, okay.
I'm having call, but I'm testing something. Yes.
Oh, Nicola. Okay, thank you.
Chapter,
Yeah.
yeah, since we finished.
Without the plugin.
I'm the substitute for Dan Morris.
All right.
But,
I knew without plugin where you are.
I don't think I can make the site visit next Tuesday. All right, that's fine. I'll be at the meeting. Yeah, well, you'd declare an interest anyway, because I know a member of the family. So you do? Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I'll explain it to you. Morning, Robert.
Good morning, thank you for stepping in.
All right, it's Jake.
Just give it one more minute and that's two turn up. stand on it. You're massive.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Steve and John.
and Andy Wild as well.
I know.
Yeah, Steve Smith and John Burness. I think you're ready to start.
Right, we're at 10:01, so I think we'll make a start, and if the others come in a minute, then we'll carry on. So, good afternoon, good morning. Sorry, I'm miles away there. Welcome to the Communities Overview Committee. I'm obliged to inform you the meeting's being live streamed and recorded, and can I ask you to ensure your mobile phones are switched off or on silent. And I'll ask members of the committee just to introduce themselves in case we've got any members of the public watching online. I'll start with Councillor Robert Macy, Chair of the Communities Overview Committee. If I go this way around the room, Daniel.
The one chair is Daniel Webb, Overview Scrutiny Officer.
Christian in Shropshire Council for Bridge North East Glasgow. Nigel Martin, Councillor for Vanderbilt.
David Evans, Councillor for Church Stanley Craven Arms, and substitution for Dan Morris.
You've been Duncan to the button.
Yeah, too quick for me. I'm Duncan Kerr, for Councillor for Oswestry South.
Viv.
Viv Parry, Shropshire Councillor for Ludlow South.
Mark Jones, Councillor for Caboyne, Salatin and Western Wren.
Nick Hicknott, Councillor for Ray Valley Ward.
I think we're going to be joined by a number of officers online, so I think what we'll do when we get to those items, we'll ask them to introduce themselves before they speak for the first time. So, okay. Right, we've got apologies for absence is the first item. We've had apologies from Councillor Dan Morris, and David Evans is substituting for him. Item 2 is to confirm the minutes from the meeting held on the 20th of October. These have been circulated with the agenda. Are we happy to accept those? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We've had one public question, which has been received from Mr. Bob Haddon from the Shropshire Flood Action Group Forum.
The question is as follows. Can Shropshire Council confirm that sufficient funding to meet the recommendations of the severe weather plan review will be made available? And can Shropshire Council confirm that the proposed 3-year funding arrangement for the National Flood Forum will be entered into the new financial year from April 2022?
So I believe we've got Steve Smith answering that correct. So Steve, if you could just introduce yourself and your position, just for anybody watching.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, my name's Steve Smith and I'm the Assistant Director for Infrastructure at Shropshire Council. The answer to the question is the Council has not yet finalised its budget setting process and so is unable to confirm funding arrangements at this time. And similarly, the severe weather review has not yet been finalised and so the specific needs not yet identified. However, should the indicative funding that has been suggested be confirmed by Council, funding for the 3-year commitment with the National Flood Forum will be made available and additional funding to support the Council's drainage and flood management will also be in place. Funding for specific capital schemes identified by the review will be considered against other projects for inclusion within the capital programme to ensure that the Council invests its limited funds where the greatest benefits can be delivered.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Item 4 is member questions and we haven't received any. And item 5 is disclosable pecuniary interest. Is there anybody that needs to declare? If not, good morning, Ted.
Morning.
No problem.
Do I have to declare that I live right next to a flood site?
I'll let them go after that.
Councillor Parry, no, you don't.
Right, that's all right.
Okay, thank you. So if we haven't got any of those, we'll move straight on to our main item today, which is flooding. So as I say, we've got a number of officers that are going to be presenting to us. I'll ask each of them if they can introduce themselves before they speak the first time. So I'm not sure who we want to pass to first. It's either John or Steve.
Well, again, Steve Smith, Assistant Director. Andy Wild, our Head of Highways, is going to take the lead on this paper. So I'll turn over to Andy to start with.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, everyone. Andy Wild, Head of Highways at Shropshire Council. I'll just provide an update really on a presentation, a summary presentation on the update report that was submitted to committee, and just sort of talk through some of the key areas of that. So in terms of the report itself, the report focused initially on the major flooding events that we experienced in Shropshire in 2020. And we had 3 major events in very quick succession, had a significant impact on the county and on the communities and residents and businesses. And this was very widespread. The River Severn, obviously, through Shrewsbury and Bridgnorth was the key area that attracted the most attention, but there was significant flooding events in other parts of the county right the way across the board. And like I said, this had a very significant impact. You know, that has prompted a number of things on our side in terms of reviewing and assessing how we responded to that event. And again, this spans different areas of the council right the way across the board. So a lot of learning and a lot of good sort of data was collected from those events. And what that has done is informed a severe weather plan that is now in development, and that work is ongoing. What that is doing is, again, looking at some of the information that was gleaned from how we responded, and there was a huge amount of positive work that was undertaken during those events, massive effort across the council. But with any sort of event like that, there's always things that you can learn from and improve on, and that's what we focused on. But the report is also very, very tuned in to the climate change agenda and taking a strategic look at what climate change is going to mean for Shropshire, what that is going to mean for our operational plans and how we respond to these events. And again, the report draws this out and focuses on key areas and rainfall predictions in particular. You know, those predictions going into the future really need to focus the attention, as do river level predictions, and those 2 things are likely to have an impact. So again, and it's sort of making sure that there's a clear understanding of the multi-agency work that takes place with ourselves as the catalyst and often the lead in these events. But the Environment Agency play a huge part, as do other agencies and supporting partners that we engage with, and work with the Environment Agency on flood barriers, how those are deployed, and then looking at those river level predictions, you know, and understanding from the Environment Agency how they're planning their sort of agenda to meet the ask, and look at what could be achieved in these areas that have been impacted by severe flooding. So I think, you know, really in summary, our position has been to focus really on preventative and try and do as much preventative work that can be undertaken with the resources that we have. There is a need for us to be reactive in these instances, but you know, we focus very heavily on what we can do as a preventative measure to try and make ourselves as resilient as a county as possible and support the communities that are impacted when these events take place. In terms of highway maintenance, you know, we've made a huge amount of changes over the last 18 months to specifically, you know, around reactive drainage and operational drainage, which has been revitalised. And you know, we now do a huge amount of preventative work on our network to make sure that our assets are as robust as they possibly can be. Drainage systems are in place. Natural drainage solutions have been reinstated. So as a county, that when we do get these events, we can cope as best we can. And all of that complements the work that the flood risk management team undertake, and John Bellis and the people that support John. You know, that there's a huge amount of work takes place in the communities, and with flood action groups and community support groups to try and give us these communities the support that they need. So it's, you know, as far as the council is concerned, you know, we are now planning for a range of scenarios, and as Steve Smith said, the severe weather plan is still work in progress, but the best outcome for us in terms of trying to deliver when these events happened is to have a plan for all eventualities. And you know, these plans needed to be looked at, so we had a clear operational procedure to deploy in each of these key locations when severe weather events take place. And what has to be sort of understood is that we are now trying to plan for increasingly difficult scenarios off the back of climate change, because you know, those events that took place in 2020 were unprecedented, and you know, all of the statistics coming out suggest that that's going to continue into the future. So I think in summary then, you know, that we are now better placed as a highway authority through the work that we've undertaken to cope, but there's still a huge amount of work to be done. There's always more that we can do, and our teams are focused on planning for those events. And the council is very, very committed to supporting communities and working proactively with them to make sure that we have as robust as possible plans in place. And we will continue to be a catalyst for the multi-agency working that has been so productive up until now, and that will continue. And we will ensure that we are supporting and doing everything that we possibly can to support the work that needs to take place across the board as we try and plan for future events. So that concludes the summary to the report, and I'll hand back. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, I guess we'll open it up to members. Is there anything? There was a briefing for members that was held, was it last week? Yeah, last week. You've had the report through, which is quite detailed. I think it's like 13, 14 pages of the summary of this. And obviously we've just heard from Andy. So is there anybody who wants to start with the comments? Okay, I'll come to David Evans first.
Thank you. Well, I live in a small town called Craven Arms, obviously, and this is one of the smaller areas we have flooding problems with. We've had problems now for the last 2 years. We've been working with John Ballas to try and overcome it. And there is 2 quick fixes here, and I'm sure it wouldn't cost a lot of money. It's all to do with trash guards, and we don't seem to go any further on with it. And one night I was out and I took 5 pallets of sandbags out from the Craven Arms depot around houses in Craven Arms, which personally myself. There's 21 houses flooded, and these people now are coming on to me saying, what's happening with the trash guards? We haven't heard anything, and we're going to have a repeat of what's happened before if it's flash flooded. And I just want to know something positive of what is going to happen to Craven Arms, because people cannot get insured now a second time on their houses. My son was flooded, his house, he suffers mental health. He couldn't go back in the house. I had to get him to come and live with me. And I don't want other people suffering with mental health. It's a matter of stress and worry about what's going to happen with flash flood in the Craven Arms when we get these things arising. And this needs to be sorted out. It cannot go on. It's 2 years now, and we're no further down the line of solving the problem. Okay, thank you.
I don't know if one of the officers wants to pick that one up. John.
Hi, Chair. John Bellis, Logistics Manager for Shropshire Council. Hi, David. Yeah, obviously we're aware of the issues with the grills in Craven Arms. I think, as we've talked about before, those grills at the moment, there's a conversation on the ownership of the asset with Severn Trent Water. We're under the impression they are Severn Trent Water assets. Severn Trent Water had a meeting this week to discuss them. I've requested an update, and as soon as I get that, I'm happy to share it with you. There is a project for Craven Arms. There's two potential projects for Craven Arms, one on the Clun Road as well. Once we've got that confirmation with Severn Trent Water, Shropshire Council do want to progress with those, and we'll be applying for Environment Agency Flood Defence Granting Aid to deliver them in the coming years. So if you can just bear with us until I get that update from Severn Trent, and we'll then proceed on that basis.
Can I just go back?
Yeah. Yeah. What is going to happen in the meantime if those houses get flooded
I was in Craven Arms because predominantly it's to do with the condition of the grills and whether they're blocked. I was in Craven Arms probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they were clear at that time. So if we have any intense rainfall, I would hope during this event we shouldn't have so much of an issue. If we are talking about long-term maintenance and if Trent won't step in, maybe it's a conversation we could potentially have with highways to see whether we could do something in the interim.
When my phone rings at past 1 in the morning, I've got water in my house. What are we going to tell people? It's me they contact first. It's not the council, because there's nobody they can get hold of during those hours. And when I go out at 1 o'clock in the morning and I don't get back into bed till 7 o'clock, you're going to find you're a happy councillor. What do I tell these people that these 16 houses that's now been flooded twice? Okay, we're not moving forward.
Then we'll, yeah. So we had hopefully you're not an unhappy councillor when it gets to that point of what they're doing. So okay, if I move ahead a bit next.
Yeah.
And Nigel.
Another unhappy councillor, I'm afraid. If you look at 4.2 of the report, that shows you what happens in Ludlow, where I live. That shows you that how the river has come over, and it happens in 10 minutes. I have never had a report to my house to tell me that that's going to happen. It's always been the neighbours that have let me know. I would like to have some form of being able to get hold of somebody at the council, Mr. Evans, Councillor Evans, that I cannot get hold of anybody at the council at all. It's dreadful. We have decided now, the residents of Teamside, a lady approached me yesterday actually, and has said that we're not satisfied with what is going on as for the flooding team that we've got. They seem to be only dealing with Core Street, nothing is being done for Teamside. They've asked me, will I organise a neighbours meeting, which will be after Christmas, to try and get something done, that we could do something. You know, I've always tried to ask if we could have some sort of barrier that will come out across the road at the bottom there where the wall is, to keep the water back, because it dips there. As it comes over the wall, it dips. So what happens is it then runs towards the rest of the road, which is Teamside where I live. It comes up to the house next door. We get about 2 or 3 feet running along the road, and then it comes with a great gush. And as you can see by the photograph, it tries to get back into the river. Now, if there's nobody there, nobody in any of the houses, which I'm afraid we've got a couple of neighbours that don't come back because they can't be bothered with it, they lock all the gates off in the gardens, we can't get that river water to go back into the river. There is no way of doing it. It needs the services to come and open those doors for us. We do put cars in the road to keep traffic from going up and down the road, because with the we get lorries and all sorts of things, including tractors, who, if you look at the window of the gentleman, it's right up to the halfway up the doors and up to the bottom of the window. Then if you get a lorry or a traffic or something, it flushes it straight through the window, straight through the letterboxes on the doors, and the houses are then full of water. Now, if we could get that barrier, there would be people in that road now who are younger than me who will run out and do something about it and get it across the road. It needs a pump up one that we can keep the water back. Now, I'm sure that would save, we won't get any more insurance money, I'm sure they won't. It would save all the problems that we have, and having to get people in to strip those houses every time. It takes maybe 6 or 7 months to get these people back into their homes. They're having to live upstairs, some of them, and the ones with the cottages can't live in them anymore. So we really need the council to do something about it. And as I said, we're going to have this meeting after Christmas and organise ourselves in Teamside.
Okay. Just taking that, I don't know if anyone wants to pick up that one particularly, but the other thing I was picking up from that and from Councillor Evans is, I was just wondering, with the plans you're working on, is there any changes to how you'll communicate with local members and so on and things like that, and whether there is an out of hours option, etc. So if someone can pick those up.
Thank you, Chair. What I suggest is that Chris Westwood respond to the contact and out of hours line, and then John can respond on the sort of technical and flood management side of things. So, Chris.
Thank you, with your permission, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Perry. I know we've spoken about this between ourselves a couple of times, but if I can just cover on the contact, where we are with it and what we will be doing for the future. Just to remind all elected members, there is an emergency line that we operate specifically for elected members during the daytime hours from customer services. I will make sure that gets circulated via the committee officer just as a reminder, and it is purely for elected members' use. But what we plan to do for the future is to invoke an emergency line. There is one specific number which is for use by anybody, so that if there is a major emergency, there's a major emergency in which we are in planning, then at a point in time, all communications will go out, including this number. So people just have one number to call. And that means that on the receiving end, then my staff in the customer service centre will know to prioritise that line. So I'm working with communications, I'm working with emergency planning on the severe weather plan to decide at which point in time that number is then invoked. Because I do appreciate, you know, we're a busy contact centre. We take calls from many different council services. The reason we keep separate numbers is priority. But if we use a specific line for emergencies, flooding being the first, it should make things clearer. It should make it easier for us to pick that up as an urgent. With regards to out of hours, that can be more difficult. I fully acknowledge that. At the moment, the out of hours service is still handled by an external third party, and it will be until the end of this financial year. So if there is, unfortunately, any flooding over the winter, it will be done through that third party. But for the future, I'm under instruction to bring that out of hours service back in-house into a Shropshire Council team. And the intention for me is to use the council's CCTV team. These staff are already shift workers, so they are available 24/7, and it will be 365 days a year. So they'll cover all weekends and all bank holidays. It does require some investment, so it is subject to a business case, but I am sure that the business case will be successful. It will be going through this week, actually, so we already have advance permission to do that. What it means by bringing it back in-house for every one of us is that I can continue to run that members line specifically overnight to make sure, and that team will then understand exactly what it's for. But it allows us to join things up. These are staff that have done this task before, so they understand the way the council works. They can properly triage out anything that is and isn't urgent and make sure it gets through to the right people. I just think that by bringing it back in-house, we can better shape it, we can better develop it as a better response to circumstances like this, because it's something that belongs within the council and we understand the way in which we need to work and respond to this. So I would hope that for the future, that does give some clarity on how we're going to handle those contacts coming in. And I welcome any questions on it.
Can I come back? Minutes.
Yeah, just briefly.
Can I just say thank you very much for that? We desperately need that telephone number. I was out there for 6 hours actually, wading about in water up to my stomach. Can I just say that please, can you organise something with the police and the fire brigade? Because they wanted to send the fire brigade down the road. We're trying to stop this wave of water going into those houses and making things worse. They can't seem to understand that we need signs out at both ends as well to stop the, how should I say, the people who come and want to look at the people that have been flooded. And we get hundreds of them in the space of the day. So if we could get some signs out that say, please do not drive down this road, it's flooded, instead of people just ignoring it and driving down. That's why we have to put the cars in the road. Thank you.
Okay, I'm thinking that's one you can probably take away specifically, is it? Unless John, you want to address that now?
Yeah, hi Councillor Barry. I think just a few things to pick up on the original points, and I'll talk about that as well. So flooding in Ludlow, it's important to remember that both the team and the Corv are classified as main river. So Environment Agency take overall responsibility for that flooding. Environment Agency are also responsible for providing a flood warning service. So if you're not getting that flood warning, you can sign up to the Environment Agency's flood warning service, and I'm happy to support you and any other excuse me, any other residents down there in making sure everyone's signed up to that. In terms of actually addressing the flooding, following the 2020 flooding in Ludlow, the Environment Agency have actually produced what are called accelerated project reports. Those reports are looking into all of the sources in flooding, both in Teamside and in Corv Street, and have assessed several potential alleviation options in terms of a cost benefit score, and are then now investigating whether any of those can be taken forward as a project. I think we're aware of the wall that's down at Teamside, and I think that was one of the options that was explored. Again, I'm happy to work through those reports with yourselves in the Town Council, just to try and understand those a little bit better. And finally, in terms of actions by Shropshire Council, I think you mentioned in your first statement that flooding there happens very, very quickly, and it is difficult for councils and other agencies to respond to the flooding in Ludlow. The production of community flood action plans is something Shropshire Council are really keen on supporting. It's something we're sort of looking at in other areas as well. So there may be option for the provision of materials and sort of agreement of actions by the local community before a flood happens that we can again work with you on and actually write a community flood action plan for Ludlow. So I think probably there's a lot to unpack there, but happy to set up a meeting and discuss it all in more detail.
Okay,
Yes, I'll do that, thank you.
okay, thank you. I think Nigel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question was in relation to para 6.6 to 6.8 in terms of the draft severe weather plan. It's slightly worrying, these three paragraphs in particular, in the respect that we haven't got a timescale as yet, it seems, for the final production of this plan. And also 6.8 points out that it's all funding dependent, and what that is worries me, obviously, given the difficulty that the council's in terms of funding. I'm just wondering whether or not we're able to do the work that we're doing with regard to putting together this severe weather plan with a view to working with other agencies like the Environment Agency that's been mentioned in order to try and see if we can pull funding resources if necessary in order to try and better achieve, what we're all after, which is to try and see if we can do the best we can to solve the problems that are coming our way through climate change.
Okay, I'm not sure if you want to pick that one up.
I'm happy to pick that up, Chair. So I think thank you, Councillor Harton, for your question. I mean it is a valid point. This is a vital piece of work, but it's also quite a significant piece of work. And I think it's fair to say that the events of 2020 sort of certainly brought a lot of issues into focus for us, and we've had to look at a wide range of initiatives and plans to bring this to the fore. And what we didn't want to do was do a light touch piece of work that didn't resolve all of the issues, because as I said in the summary, this spans the whole council. There are a wide range of services that need to be drawn in to make all of this work in a flooding event, and then also the fallout from it. So it's a significant undertaking, and again the point around funding, that's as was highlighted in the response to the question, we still don't know what the outcome of that report's findings are going to be, and therefore don't have a clear picture for what the ask is likely to be on funding. So I think that the answer is that we still don't know that position yet, but we are in a stronger position than we have been because of work that has been undertaken. We haven't stood still and waited for this report to come out to act. There's been an awful lot going on behind the scenes to put us in a stronger position, and the report will just strengthen that further.
We need to come back on that one.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, one point I did mention there is, are we doing joint work with, for example, the Environment Agency to try and see where we can, where we can use their expertise and potentially take advantage of funding that they might have.
I mean, John is probably better placed to answer that, but I think that the multi-agency working is an ongoing piece of work. The partnership working is very strong, and I know there's multi-layered flood action groups, community support groups, all of which are looking at specific problems. And I don't know in terms of funding, John, is that something that you can pick up?
Yeah, I certainly Shropshire Council do work very, very closely with the Environment Agency. We have a really good relationship with them locally. Obviously, both organisations have quite clearly defined roles within a flood event, but certainly, as Andy's mentioned there, we are working jointly in communities with the National Flood Forum, supporting them in a range of issues. I think obviously there's one down in Bucknell that you may be aware of. We also work we're part of the RFCC Regional Flood and Coastal Committee. So we will look for joint projects with the Environment Agency that we can fund through that mechanism. And I was talking about the accelerated projects reports before in Bridgenorth, Shrewsbury and Ludlow. A lot of the recommendations in there have been sort of joint proposals between the councils. So I think overall, in answer to your question, yes, we do look for those opportunities and we do work in partnership wherever we can.
Okay, thank you. I think Mark. I'm not sure whether this is going to be much use to anybody, but the problem we have in our area is not major rivers, it's small tributaries that block up when there's a decent heavy flood. And obviously lots of culverts get blocked up, whether when we have a heavy duty weather warning, whether we can advise everyone to make sure they check their culverts and the trash guards before the weather erupts too much so they can be cleared so the water could get away. Not sure that's going to help the good people of Shrewsbury when all that water comes down even quicker, but we find those little tributaries can block up quite quickly and be quite dangerous if the trash is in the way. I was in Western Rin where we've got a little brook running right through the middle of it, and I went out and cleared it about a year ago, and when I cleared it, the level of the brook reduced by about a foot. You know, there was that much trash in the trash guard, and then that would obviously overflow at some point in time. Obviously, some of the trash guards will get filled up fairly soon if the water's coming down very quickly. So I don't know whether we could either do a survey of all the places where there's culverts and bridges and warn people more. These things need clearing up. I think the communities are happy to help do that as long as they're made aware that the weather's coming down and they need to clear the trash guards.
Yeah, happy to pick that one up. So I think yeah, it's again a very valid point, and I'm sure sort of John will sort of feed in on this as well. But we do an awful lot of work with landowners to try and encourage this riparian responsibility that they have to maintain watercourses and other assets, culverts, trash screens. Because you're right, you know, in certain instances, those a lack of maintenance can have quite a significant impact. So, you know, our flood action officers do support landowners and try and work jointly with them to ensure, certainly at this time of year, that routine maintenance is undertaken. But on the flip side, we're also looking at, you know, slow the flow initiatives in certain places where they make sense. So, you know, to try and hold some of that water back and prevent hold water back in catchment in key areas, because that can have benefits as well. So, you know, in terms of the work that we're underdoing, I think it's vital that we continue to do that. But I must stress, you know, a lot of this is in private ownership, and we're reliant on landowners to do their bit, really. John, have you got anything more you want to add on that point?
No, I think you've hit it there, Andy. I think the land drainage team do a lot of the work engaging with those landowners. I think it is a landowner's responsibility to make sure their assets are maintained. But and I think, as you said, if we're looking for those opportunities for natural flood management, an unmaintained watercourse in some locations actually can provide that flood benefit. So I think it's important identifying areas where maintenance is required and needs to be done at certain times of year, and those other areas of Shropshire where you can let nature sort of take a bit of the burden off us during those flood events and hold that water back, and to protect properties. And I think it's sort of finding that balance is really, really important.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to make a more wider, more general point. I mean, clearly mitigation is important, and we've heard some examples of how we can improve that, but I think we've tapped the main issue, which is if flood volumes are going to be 27% higher by 2050, that will exhaust the resources of this council. It won't stop there. it'll continue to get worse. And we've got no effective solution to meeting that from the resources we've got available to us. So the report tells us that the reason for all this flooding is climate change. And I think we need to say to the Cabinet, we need to redouble our efforts on climate change. If you want one example of what that means, we've just had a report from the National Infrastructure Commission, which said one of the reasons we might not reach our targets on climate change is waste and recycling, because recycling rates across the country are stagnant and waste rates are increasing. And you'll know I put a motion down to the council a few months ago just to say, can we have a waste minimisation strategy? No idea what's in it, just can we have one? It would make sense to help people try to minimise the waste, however much advisory that is, but just to say to people, this is a very important way of reducing climate change and stopping the people of Ludlow from getting their houses flooded, because that's what this report is telling us. And as you know, the council turned that down. Well, I think we need to go back to the Cabinet and say we need to think again. All these things we said we couldn't do in the past, we're now seeing the catastrophic effects of those decisions, and we're going to have to review some of those decisions. And I would suggest to you that a waste minimisation is quite an easy one. It's quite a soft one, and actually probably reduces financial savings on the council rather than actually costing us money. If we can't even tackle that, then we're going to have to spend a heck of a lot of money protecting water properties behind increasingly high walls. You can't defend Dewsbury from a 27% increase in flood volumes. We're all going to be abandoning houses, and if that's the legacy we're going to leave to future generations, I wonder what they'll make of it all.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody wants to respond to that. Well, we'll take that as a notice and we'll move on that one. Christian?
Thank you. Yes, as you're aware, Bridge North residents in the past have been to the Bridge North Highway depot to collect sandbags at times of flooding. With that depot having been temporarily closed, are the appropriate communications in place by the highways team to ensure that local residents know where they need to go in the future to obtain the sandbags, which I presume is the Stanley Lane depot?
Okay. John?
Hello, yeah. So obviously, well, I've recently had a meeting with a couple of Bridge North Town councillors to potentially identify a site within Bridge North where sandbags could be stored during a flood event, which they can then be accessed by residents and distributed. So that work is on, that has been considered, and work is ongoing to identify and confirm that site. And also we are currently looking at to review the traffic management arrangements in Bridge North during an event as well. So that there is work ongoing on that.
Can I just take Christine's second point of, and how, once the plan's in place, how will that get communicated out to elected members and others?
I think in Bridge North that is yet to be decided. I think the meeting took place last week. So the lines of communication haven't yet been established, but they will be. I think also what I would say is the storing of sandbags in strategic locations is something we are looking to roll out in other areas. We've obviously talked about Ludlow. That may be another location where that could take place. Again, I think we need to understand that sometimes during a flood event, Shropshire Council services are stretched, and we can't get to every single location. So having these sort of satellite areas where things can be stored for a response is probably a really good idea in the way that we'd like to go, if possible.
Okay, that's okay. Thanks. Nick?
Thank you, Chair. One or two comments I want to make just on some of the points that have been made, but I welcome the officers for the report and the detail included in that. I think it's very important that riparian owners are, and I would put in inverted commas, encouraged to clear their water courses, because that does make a big difference, particularly and in the rural area where I live. I'm not really talking about the River Severn as such. Obviously, I'm talking about tributaries that run into that. But it is important, and we have to bear in mind that some of these owners of properties that have a brook or rivulet or whatever you want to call it, because they're all regarded as rivers, aren't they, for the purposes of this comment. Some of them are elderly and not capable of actually getting their wellies on, getting into even a small stream or whatever and clearing it. But regardless of that, they still have riparian responsibilities to clean it. So that is a bit of a difficult one.
I think the single telephone number for point of contact when flooding occurs for reactive responses is a good idea, but I am concerned that in the last episode of flooding we had in my village, you would have had 25 or 30 people trying to ring this number if it was publicised, and if it's going to be open to members of the public, I think a particular telephone number or point of contact for members or even local parish councillors would be very useful, because one for members of the public is going to get swamped. I think the fire service involvement, which was mentioned, is very useful, but we had the fire service at our last flooding event, which was 2020, and I know the local officer in charge of that fire tender said that he didn't feel he could do anything at all, even though the appliance was there. He couldn't do anything until the water had at least peaked and then started to go down, because even the fire service with their pumps can't cope with massive volumes of water, and if it's still rising, then they can't do a lot. There were multiple properties flooded, which I know the point has been made, but the members the owners of these properties are unable to get insurance for flooding now. It's happened to the property 3 times, and no insurance company is going to insure against flooding until improvements are made, which hopefully things are in hand. Flood action groups, I note on the report there's 14 at the moment, and I wonder whether we need to push to get more flood action groups involved. In my area, we have got a flood action group. It is very active. We recently held a multi-agency group meeting organised by the Flood Forum, and thank you for officers for attending to that. You do actually achieve things at these multi-agency meetings. And I do think communication with these groups is vital, including the internal drainage boards for this area, because they maintain a lot of the ditches and trenches in fields, although I do take John's point that some of these trenches and ditches perhaps need to be allowed to overflow so that it helps to slow the flow further on down. And I think any work that can be done relatively cheaply in some of the rural areas, combined with all the other work that's done in rural areas, could actually help the situation in Shrewsbury and the River Severn. So don't let's forget that most of these tributaries end up in the River Severn or other large rivers in Shropshire. And I think anything we can do further upstream to stop that is very useful. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Can I just quick one to tell John?
Go on, if you want to throw in a quick one, that if it's
John,
along
John,
mix.
can I just tell you that McConnell's, which is in Teamside, have taken the sandbags. Could we have some more as well, please? Because they're going to leave it that we can get a key to get the gate open and all the residents to take sandbags from there.
Okay.
Joyce, I'll drop you an email now and we'll have a conversation offline afterwards about that.
Okay.
Okay. Is there anything you want to pick up from Nick's points that he's raised as well? I think specifically because I had the question noted as well of, do we have those community flood action plans and groups everywhere we want them as yet, or are there any areas, as Nick has said, that we'd like to see more of them?
Chair, yeah, I think that the National Flood Forum obviously have been supporting those 14 groups in Shropshire. I am aware there are several others that are being developed. It definitely takes the community to come together to develop those groups and somebody to step up to chair them. So there are several other locations that the National Flood Forum are working on, and hopefully groups will be set up soon. I would say if there are any locations where further groups are required, they can either get in contact with myself or National Flood Forum direct, and we can talk about trying to support them there as well.
Okay. If I can just add in a question that in terms of the severe weather plan, and we've asked WSP to develop it, is that going to have different sort of options within it in terms of resources, funding and so on, and what the different impacts would be when that comes forward?
So I think the plan is currently looking at our response to a range of severe weather events, not just flooding. Obviously the council's response will be dependent on the weather warnings that we receive from the Met Office, and our level of preparedness will pretty much be based on that. And I think I will be undertaking a review after this meeting of the draft that's been provided. Now the draft will make recommendations on how we can deliver that service in line with our current arrangements and potentially future arrangements, and also how we can integrate some national best practice into that. I think, yeah, I'm happy to report back to everyone once that review has taken place.
Okay, and just picking up on your other point about the RFCC and so on, is that something that it sounds like we're probably this is going to be a rolling item, and when the plan comes back, scrutiny could have another look at it. Is getting someone from the RFCC, whether from that puts together the programme or something else, to talk to members about how that's one of the forums for the joint working?
Yeah, certainly. So our RFCC is a process where we can claim money from the Environment Agency for flood defence projects, and yeah, happy to bring somebody in or provide some more information to members on that process. That's no problem at all.
Okay. Is there any other questions we want to pick up? Okay. I think from my perspective, again, I think it sounds like the work that's ongoing is going to be of interest to the committee. We want to see what comes back as the draft plan and so on. I don't know whether there's any opportunity to see that before it goes to Cabinet, just so that this committee could consider it, make any recommendations it wants to before Cabinet consider it in the future. But as you say, it will be guided in terms of the timelines of what's being prepared and moving forward. But if other members of the committee are happy, I just think being proactive up front, we could accompany it, send a few recommendations if we have any with that. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So if that's possible, if we can leave that with you to try and engineer into the process somewhere.
Okay, we'll take that away as a chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. I think the only other point I pick up on today is the communications and whether every local member is completely clear on what's available to them, whether it's the specialist number, whether it's the plans coming forward. I'm thinking if there's possibility of just a briefing sheet to go out to all local members that says, in the event of a flood, these are the different ways you can act. You will probably tell me there's already one there and already in circulation, but if there isn't, is that something we can arrange?
Chairman, I think yes, absolutely, we can arrange it, and we'll include details of how to sign up for that floodline approach as well. So it's not just a council approach; it's a more broad approach that people can have access to.
I think that's it. I think that's the impression we're getting. Is there's a lot of agencies involved. There's lots of different owners and so on. Yeah, if we can have something that covers all that sort of thing off. I think, as you say, it's quite a stressful time at that point. So have one thing to refer to would probably help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, excellent. Right, is there anything else we want to pick up? No? Okay, in that case, thank you very much for today's presentation. I think obviously we will see you again when it reaches its next stage and consider from there. So thank you very much. So item 7 on the work programme is the work programme review. Daniel?
Thank you, Chair. Daniel Weber, Review and Scrutiny Officer. There's a few things to raise with you for discussion, as well as some notes I'll be taking during the course of this meeting going forward. You've requested to see the draft of the domestic abuse strategy, which isn't available yet. I'm still chasing that, trying to find a time when that will be available for you to look at. I think, as often with these strategies, there's inevitably timetable creep with them, but we do have a commitment that you can see that before it goes to Cabinet for approval or for agreement. Similarly, you've just asked now to look at the flood management, the draft flood management strategy, which again I'll endeavour to bring to this committee before it goes through to Cabinet for agreement, to give you some opportunity to contribute towards that. At the moment, your agenda has a topic at the end of January called Working with Town and Parish Councils, and I mean, do forgive me, this is sort of I'm sort of talking on the fly a little here, but it does strike me that within this committee and within other committees there's a recurrent theme going on, which is about how the local authority receives communications from other partner agencies and how it distributes them not only to you as elected members, but to town and parish councils as well. It's possible that there are some gaps in these processes across different services, not just the issues that you've highlighted today, but within the Place Overview Committee with regards to roadworks and streetworks, and within the Health and Other Social Care Committee with regards to changes in service, temporary closures of service, recruitment gaps, and so on and so forth. And I do wonder whether this is a piece of work that this committee might wish to embark upon, to see if it can identify where those gaps are and to make any recommendations of change with how the council works with partners and how it works with town and parish councils. It just strikes me as a more focused approach than the one that's in the work programme at the moment. Finally, there was another request from the Health and Adult Social Care Committee, which has repeatedly highlighted shortfalls in staff recruitment across all sorts of health provision throughout Shropshire, through care homes, community hospitals. And one of the issues that it highlights time and again is the lack of availability of affordable housing or key worker housing throughout the county, Shropshire and Self-Region local authority areas. And a request has come through from the Health and Other Social Care Committee to this committee to ask whether this is something that the committee is minded to have a look on, if you can identify any recommendations, both in the shorter term with regards to key worker housing provision, in the longer term to how the council plans for and provides affordable housing, not just in Shrewsbury and market towns, but in rural areas as well. So if I can leave those 3 or 4 things with you for discussion, that's briefly social housing provision, communications from town and parish councils, and the forthcoming strategies around domestic abuse and flood management.
Okay, do members have any thoughts on those?
Yeah, happily support those. I think the new test of affordable housing would be a good thing to look at. It is a major constraint both for public sectors but also for employers. I think it's worth looking into. The other one I did raise, and it may have been determined that it wasn't for this committee, was the situation regarding taxes. There are major concerns in Oswestry that taxi drivers are saying it's a consequence of new policy. I'm just repeating what they're saying, I have no idea. But the consequence has been it's extraordinarily difficult to get a taxi in many parts of Shropshire at the moment, and that has serious health and safety implications because people are risking lifts with all sorts of other people, and we've got people probably breaking the law or doing various work rounds of organising minibuses and things going on. So the request was, can we just have a look and see if there's any data about the availability of taxis and what has been the impact of the policy when it was introduced pre-COVID, of course, in 2019. And I don't know whether that's one, who decides which community, which overview security committee looks at which topic, but obviously it's an impact for the community which is happening now.
Okay, I think just before we go any further, I think what I would say is, in terms of these ones, I think the intention would be, where they're sort of coming up with ideas like the comms and so on, is obviously that we would then work up a terms of reference draft to circulate to the committee to see, we're talking about this subject in general, is this gives us a bit of focus around what will come to committee. So
yeah, absolutely. I think rather than me just running off and saying to the officers, can you just provide a brief on this or tell us everything you know about it? I think what I might suggest that we do is I'll either bring these as papers for your next meeting in January, or I'll circulate them through December and early January for comment. So basically then it just provides a bit more structure for the officers so they know that the data that they want. And I think Councillor Kerr just made some very excellent points there with regards to taxi and private hire shortages, in terms of we'd like to understand what the policies are and what the changes have been, and whether or not his observation that there are shortages is backed up by data. So I think that's a really good example actually of a good start to the 10 that I can circulate for you to add to as you see fit. So if that's okay with you, I will work on these through December and circulate them either in advance of the meeting or in your papers in January.
So if I'm happy with that, I mean, so are we happy we add the taxi one into the mix on these things? Yeah. Okay. Viv?
2 things actually. It's a long time since we've talked to the housing associations about anything to do with housing or anything. If I remember rightly, it must be 5 years since we had them all in the room and they talked about different things that they do at different housing associations. I think that's a really good idea. We should be thinking about people that are working, you know, socially for us. The other thing about the taxis, I have had quite a few meetings with taxi drivers in Ludlow. This subject has come up a long time ago. They tell me that unless they are car hire, they don't have to work in the evenings because they make enough money during the day. I think it's a good idea. We cannot get a taxi at all after 5:30 at night in Ludlow. I've been told by licensing, because I'm also on licensing, that they can't make taxi drivers work the hours that we would like to work. They work the hours that they want to work themselves. But it would be rather nice for our elderly people, and we do have an awful lot of those in Ludlow, if we could have a taxi on a Sunday. Can't get taxis on Sundays.
I think from our point of view, I think probably it'd be something that looked at, because I'm very conscious as the committee, we are here, but I think some of these pieces of work are ones where we can try and pull in external ones. So whether it's people who can't get a taxi, and whether it's actual taxi drivers as well,
yeah,
alongside the officers, and a bit the same with the town and parish bit. There's obviously an obvious link there to try and get them involved with the process.
This is, strictly speaking, I suspect this is probably a matter for the place review committee, but it would fit very nicely, I think, with this committee. And I know that Councillor Barrow's work there is quite heavy at the moment, so I think she'd be more than happy for you to do this piece. But I'll just square that circle, but I can't.
Out of courtesy, I'll speak to the chair of the place committee as well and see. I'm sure I know what the answer is going to be.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure as well.
I'm just wondering, the housing associations bit, I think probably that would fold into the thing around the availability of a specific sort of house, and it might be a good question to ask them specifically what do they do, or what do they think they could do, etc., etc. So, okay. Sorry, if I just come to Nick. Sorry.
I only want to just say that I think one of the important ones is probably the way we communicate with town and parish councils. I know from my point of view, let's remember that particularly my parish councils are the first point of contact for anybody, and this sort of links in a bit with affordable housing and many other issues, because I know in my area some people that are concerned about the affordable housing, never mind the other issues like speeding and everything that they bring up monthly. Affordable housing, they often go to the parish council and say what sort of assistance can we get, and I think communication with parish and town councils and Shropshire Council is vitally important, and I think we're lacking in some areas, so I do think that's something we could maybe work on.
Okay, so what I'm thinking, have we got any objections to the list? So we've got the town and parish council comms, the thing around providing more specific housing for the ones we're missing, the domestic abuse when that's ready, it comes back to us before cabinet. I'm a bit conscious that there was a deadline attached to that legally, so I'll let you. Yeah, I thought it was January they had to pass it, so I think we'll leave that to you, Daniel.
You're right, actually. I have chased that and I had no reply yet with regards to a day, so I'll continue to chase that.
Okay, the flooding one, as we've said, they know we want to see that beforehand, so that will come through, and then we'll put the taxi one in, and so on. But there's a few of those where there is a potential of it's not going to be one meeting, it's probably we want to get others involved and come up with some meaningful recommendations going forward. So if we're happy with that at the moment, and then we'll obviously review as things are coming on or off. Okay, right, Daniel, if we can work together and circulate, get some papers, and we'll circulate them prior to January's meeting.
Will do, Chair.
Okay, right, in that case, that takes us to the end of today's meeting. So thank you very much for attending and inputting, and we'll see you at the next meeting.
Meeting with Mark next week is a day that you can't make, so I've just reorganised that to the 3rd of December and put a date in